Well, hello everyone. And I just wanted to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where you are in what part of the world, but greetings and Happy New Year. We want to start promptly at 6 p.m. my time, 11 a.m. Eastern European time, just to make sure that we go through everything that we have to discuss today in 1 hour. And this is the first session of the 2026 seminar of the Space Economics Seminar, jointly organized with the Ownership Project at Harvard Business School and the European Space Policy Institute. And this semester we continue monthly online from January to May. And we have a full slate of papers and speakers. And as you know, we started last year as some sort of a pilot, and luckily it exceeded our expectation in the sense that we had over 80 participants on each seminar, and over 300 people registered across the sessions, and who came from academia, from policy institutions, from industry, from space agencies. And because we understood that we're doing something important, and there is quite a need for economics-driven conversation about space. I'm going to go over very briefly our seminar guidelines for those of you who just joined us now for the first time. I would like to ask you to keep your mics muted unless I call on you, and to post the questions in the chat, and I will let you ask them in person after the 30-minute presentation. Please do not interrupt the speakers during the presentation. We are recording this session. And if you haven't filled out the form in which you give the consent for video recording, please do so. And I want to remind you that we are asking the attendees to read the paper in advance. So we expect the questions to be really related to the questions addressed in the paper. And so before I will present the speakers, I'll ask if my colleagues, either from HBS or from ESPI, would like to say a few words at the beginning of this new semester. I saw that definitely Matt is here, and I don't know if Niha or Mattia is here, but Matt, would you like to say a few words? If not, we can move on to presenting our speakers. Matt?
I'll just say welcome, everybody. It's great to be with you again, and great to see some new faces on the screen, or at least some new names on the screen as well. So looking forward to a great second semester, and thanks to the entire team that's made this happen, from Tony and Emma to Nyenha, and especially Ioana. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so then without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speakers for today. And we decided to start this semester with a very important topic, which is orbital congestion and space debris. And we have a very interesting paper which tries to answer the question on what is realistic for the economic policy to do about this. And we are extremely happy to have Jeffrey Wagner and Mitchell Rieder from Rochester Institute of Technology. The title of the paper, as you probably saw, because we already sent it to you, is The Law and Economics of Tradable Satellite Permit, Debris Permit Market Design. And a little bit about the speakers. So Jeffrey Wagner is a professor of economics at Rochester Institute of Technology, where he teaches environmental economics, microeconomics, and the law of economics of property rights. His research focuses on the sustainable management of waste streams, including hazardous waste, radioactive waste, and orbital debris. And he has published in leading journals such as Journal of Environmental Economics and Management, Environmental and Resource Economics, and so on. And he will be joined by Mitchell Rieder. He's a senior student in economics and computer science, and he has already worked as an oil market analyst and as a research analyst in the energy sector. And he also studied abroad in Denmark. he's very much interested in environmental, energy, and space economics, and he wants to pursue a PhD in economics. So good luck with that one. And so I give the floor to you, Jeff and Mitchell. You have about 30 minutes to present the paper, and then we will move to questions.
Great, great. Thank you very much, Ioana, and colleagues. We so much appreciate this opportunity to share our research. And what Mitchell and I would like to do is I'll present the first half of our slides, and then Mitchell will present the second harder half of the slides, and we'll take all your questions. So, without further ado, let's see. Are the slides in good position?
It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So let's see. We have the title, and then is it scrolling? Let's see. Oh dear.
No,
Uh,
you have just the title page. So,
it's not going down. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay. Let me uh we had it here. Is it on now?
no.
Okay. Let me try one more time.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
If not, you can certainly share it the way you shared it the first time, and we'll deal with it, even if we don't.
Is that's not scrolling?
No.
Oh no. Okay. Hold on. Hmm? I don't think that'll work. I've had that difficulty before. Um, let me try that. Ah, okay. Let's try it one more time.
If not, maybe we can ask Emma that she should do the share screen, and you will tell her when to move from one slide to another, if that's something that you would like to do.
Yeah. Uh,
Okay, but something was changed there.
we had this.
Jeff, would you like to do that? Emma, are you prepared to share do we have the slides?
We do not have the slides, but it seems like this is working.
Okay.
Great.
Is that working now?
Yes.
So it's not full screen, but we see something. So we should go with this, I think. So so it's fine. It's not full screen, but we are seeing as you're moving through the slide. So I think you should just probably go ahead with this.
Okay. Sorry about that. Uh,
That's okay.
okay. So this audience is certainly familiar with oh no. I'm sorry, that's not working either. I can't believe it.
No, that's totally okay. You have Emma's email. Could you please email her the slides right now, and maybe you
Yeah,
can start talking, and then she's going to share the screen. Is that okay, Emma, for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Send it over and I'll get it as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
okay,
let's do that, and then you'll start talking, and I'm sure there is a nice introduction where we
that's
don't
right.
need all the bells
Um,
and whistles.
yep, just one second. Hmm? Okay. Uh, um, okay. I sent to Emma.
Good, thank you. And
Okay.
then you can start talking, and she will. I'm sure she will catch up.
Yeah. Uh, okay, let me get my slides back up for myself here. I'm sorry. I had to close them to send them. Um, okay. Um, Okay, right. So the first slide just gives a brief overview of the magnitude of the challenge that we face, right? So in 2024, um, from 2020 to 2024, we've had 342% growth in the quantity of operational satellites. Um, it's a $100 billion business, and 42% of the satellite communication revenue is generated in the U.S. market. So we want to hold on to that figure of 42%. So we're going to end up modeling the U.S. market as the dominant firm, if you will. And then we have a few data points regarding the amount of debris that we're having to manage. So what we propose in this paper are basically three things. The first thing is that we propose establishing a large regional satellite debris permit market, or what is known as a regional cap and trade framework that would utilize the current U.S. Federal Communication Commission uh, 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 guidelines and also U.S. court judicial rulings that we think support the approach that we take. The framework is inspired by the very successful U.S. EPA SO2 permit market under the Clean Air Act of 1990. And then we're going to try to leverage the U.S. Market power and the current FCC guidelines that permit the U.S. federal government to govern satellite debris plans for satellites launched both from the U.S. and outside the U.S. that seek market access in the U.S. And we feel that the model demonstrates that taking this kind of approach in the real world, of course, there are always frictions and it's hard to achieve first best efficiency, but we think that this approach would certainly be a Pareto improvement. So that's the overview. Next slide. Then we combine four literatures in this endeavor. The first literature with a few examples of the probably a couple of dozen papers in the economics of satellite debris control. Those listed there are a few of the references along those lines. And our takeaway from our literature review is that a lot of progress has been made. A lot of efficient results have been derived, but there seems to be some difficulty in getting those efficient prescriptions implemented in the real world. And our sense is that there's resistance to adopting what is commonly a Pigouvian tax approach, analogous to the resistance that other scholars and practitioners have faced in discussing carbon taxes. And so the motivation for our paper is to further explore options that are not Pigouvian taxes, but have a lot of desirable properties that might have a better chance of being enacted. So the second, so the one that we feature is the tradable permit approach. So the second batch of literature that we want to be sure to incorporate is the economics of tradable pollution permits. And we have one reference listed there. There are others in the paper. The third strand then is that a number of scholars and policymakers have thought about debris control in the sense of an international environmental agreement. So we've tried to take the economics literature with respect to those agreements and incorporate that into our thinking and to our model. And then the fourth of four is that if we think about that international environmental agreement, that would be in the presence of a larger market for the goods and services that are traded globally, transboundary. So then we'd be interested in
So sorry to
modeling.
interrupt, Jeff.
Yeah,
Where are you in the? I've got your slides up, but I don't know where we are
yeah.
in the presentation.
I'm on
Do you
the
mind?
slide 4, salient literature.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so the last of the four literatures there on that slide are having to do with the economics of pollution control in imperfectly competitive output markets with international trade, and where the production of the good generates a global pollutant. So the Meredith Foley and colleagues paper in Journal of Political Economy focuses on the market for cement, and it's situated with the U.S. as the dominant firm. And so in the U.S., cement is made by a number of American firms, domestic firms, but it's also imported from a number of other firms. And so that led us to think about using the Foley et al. Framework as a way of approaching the satellite debris global pollutant. Also, with the satellite communications are the goods, and those are, they produce services in an imperfectly competitive domestic market with international trade. So that's the literature basis for our approach. So the last slide that I'll present before I turn it over to Mitchell is we've thought then to take the approach that Foley et al. Take, which is to start with a dominant firm and competitive fringe market structure. And so if the US is generating 42% of the satellite communication revenues, we're thinking that, well, if the US had a legal and economically efficient way of putting a dent in the satellite debris problem, we might be able to leverage that large market presence, global market presence, to entice others to go along with those with that satellite debris control approach. So what we start with is modeling the profit of the dominant firm. So this is considering the entire U.S. market as an industry, as the dominant firm, if you will, in the global market. And so the first terms that you see there are basically expected revenue from satellite services. D is for the dominant firm. So in the dominant firm and fringe model, the dominant firm sets the market price, but it takes into account its knowledge of the competitive fringe cost functions. Here, the competitive fringe are the importing firms. So these are firms outside the U.S. with non-U.S. based satellites sending satellite services into the U.S. market. So we have price as a function of quantity multiplied by quantity, that's total revenue. And then what's novel, I think, in our approach is that we have the gamma function out front of the total revenue. So that gamma is a fraction between 0 and 1. And gamma is also considered a likelihood of success function, right? So the E's are emissions of debris. Little ed is the dominant firm's own emissions of debris from its satellites. So your own satellite debris is impeding your own operation. Capital E minus D, those are the current period emissions of debris from the other firms in the market in the current time period. And then E hat is the stock of satellite debris emissions from previous time periods. So you can see that the probability that the dominant firm is able to capture the total revenue that it thinks it will capture depends, right, on these emissions of satellite debris in the current period as well as from the past. And then you have the cost function for the dominant firm that increases in the quantity of satellite services that it provides, but it decreases in the emissions of debris that it yields. So if it does a better job of capturing or preventing its own satellite debris, then its cost goes up because those preventive actions are costly. So the first order conditions are what we would expect, and what we're particularly interested in is the second one, the change in profit with respect to the firm's own emissions of debris. You can see that the firm has some incentive, regardless of what other firms are doing, to try to prevent and or capture some of its own debris. The last line of that slide is just reflecting what the competitive fringe firms are going to do. So the P star there, remember the competitive fringe firms, or in this case, the importing firms, they take the dominant firm's price as given, and then they set expected marginal revenue equal to expected production cost, marginal cost, and then and same with their abatement effort, right? So let me turn it over to Mitchell in our next slide social welfare optimization, you might expect that in the standard environmental economics model, what the private parties elect to do with respect to output of the good and control of the bad, the emissions, are not socially optimal. So we model that, and then we discuss policy. So let me have Mitchell take over.
Thank you so much, Professor Wagner. So one can imagine that in a scenario where the firm's only first order condition is to maximize their own personal benefit, that the emissions that are causing damages to other firms is not particularly well modeled and not well accounted for. Usually in environmental economics, we use the social welfare optimization equation and framework to deal with these sorts of issues. So welfare would be equal to the social benefit gained from a given quantity of satellites, and then subtracting out the cost of the given production of emissions and quantity of satellites. Lastly, there are damages caused by emissions to both the firm producing them as well as the economy as a whole. So these first order conditions look a little bit different, where instead of a firm's own emissions causing damages to just themselves, the second first order condition is dealing with trying to set the cost of abating a certain amount of emissions equal to the damages it causes to all firms rather than just their own. Next slide over to the graph of tradable satellite debris permit policy. So this is best represented in a graphical way, showing that firms that are at the beginning are overproducing emissions as they are not accounting for the damages they cause to other firms and only their own personal profit and loss. So we would call this initial amount of emissions the far right E star. And to be able to get this back down to where it's socially optimal, such that the marginal damages caused by a given amount of emissions is exactly equal to the abatement cost that a firm puts into it, gets us to the other emissions, which is necessarily lower than our original equation. Next slide, if you could. Okay. So reflecting this into the personal firm framework again, the standard prescription for further to sort of address the errand term within this equation, the tau emissions delta is to deal with the tax for a given amount of emissions. This in standard economic framework is a Pigovian tax, or some amount of value assigned to each emissions that is exactly equal to the damages caused for other firms, such that this firm will now choose to produce less and get to that new equilibrium emissions. There is another term within this equation that deals with just a dominant firm, which by necessity will, or by definition, will behave more towards profit than is socially optimal. So there has to be some sort of subsidy given to a dominant firm such that they produce the socially optimal rather than the profit maximizing, or else they will act very monopolistic. These yield different first order conditions, and whether that tau value is a Pigovian tax or whether it is a defined permanent market sale price, such as we describe in our paper, that tau will account for the errand damages caused by a given amount of emissions on other firms in the market as a whole, rather than just on the emitting firm, as was reflected in the original equation. If you go to the next slide, this is factors in favor of cap and trade. So there are three main considerations that myself and Professor Wagner had when going through and saying that cap and trade is a very favorable framework for this. The first is within current legislation and regulatory infrastructure, the United States has the ability to determine certain parameters that satellite producers or telecommunication operators have to perform to be able to operate within United States markets. This is particularly well defined within a certain case, Telesat Canada v. US FCC, which was basically saying that tells that Canada was in violation of a certain parameter that the United States set, and such that establishes legal precedent for the US regulating foreign firms based off their own regulations. Given a tradable permit market, this also fulfills the WTO regulation of equal treatment across all firms. So WTO states that you're not able to really treat your domestic firms with kind of prejudice. You're not able to give them certain benefits that foreign firms do not have, or tax foreign firms without the domestic firms having that same equivalent taxation. This tradable permit market affects all firms equally, so it fulfills the WTO regulation. A particularly favorable portion of a cap and trade framework is that transactions are intra-market. Now, this has a couple of key components. The first is that there is no centralized collection burden. Firms trade with each other such that the cash flow goes between firms rather than being collected by a certain centralized agency that then has to handle collecting and then redistributing. This particular framework also allows for firms to strictly benefit from its implementation. Say a firm is producing a certain amount of emissions and reduces that emissions faster than their allocation decreases. This means that they get a stream of revenue from firms that are less innovative and are adapting more slowly to this new framework. This also gives an incentive for firms to, for lack of a better term, regulate each other. If firm A is profiting from this whole engagement and firm B is attempting to dodge it to be able to pay less, firm A will likely have an incentive to regulate and report firm B that they're in violation. This is particularly powerful within satellite markets, as it is very difficult for regulation to keep track of every in particular thing that happens. But if every firm is reporting each other and having a more sort of cohesive enforcement, then it's a little bit easier on regulation and enforcement in general. Lastly, in terms of environmental regulation, cap and trade has had a huge amount of success. This is particularly true within the US SO2 market, as we mentioned earlier, within the EU emissions trading system, enacted at least written in 2005, as well as the more recent IMO net zero framework, which was just proposed, I guess, last year now, and is set to go into force soon. Next slide, if you could. So just leaving you with some takeaway points. So satellite debris is harmful in many ways. It's harmful to both other firms participating in the market as well as society as a whole. There's a value of a clear night sky. There are several other damages that are caused by satellite debris, and it needs regulation, I think is a clear takeaway from just the whole conversation that this seminar has had. Our research shows that cap and trade is Pareto improving, implementable within current US FCC framework. It has shown success on a global scale with the IMO and the EU emissions trading system. And that is a very powerful force, because if this is able to be adapted globally into a global cap trade system, it allows for stemming of the flow of satellite debris into space, where it's very hard to recapture and mitigate it ex post. And going on to the last slide, I just want to say thank you to the Schwall Family Fund for being able to supply funding to undergraduate economic students for research. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for really sticking to the time frame. And congratulations for having such an interesting paper co-authored with an undergraduate student. And Luisa, I see that you made three very interesting points in the chat. Would you like to make all three of them? Like on video, or do you want me to read them? Lisa? Okay, then if you do not hear me, I will read them. So so Lisa
Oh,
is
sorry,
making the point.
Joanna, I got it.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah, you're back. Okay, go
Yes, I'm
ahead.
back. Yeah, I couldn't switch on so it's something to do with
It's
your intro.
Mercury
Uh,
is retrograde or something
yes,
with our
very,
technology. Please
very
go ahead.
quickly. So Jeff and Mitchell, thank you so much. It's a very nice paper. Just three quick questions. The first is how you model the actually the cumulative effect of debris. There is a very well-known effect which is called the Kessler syndrome, which basically says that overall we may reach a critical threshold in the overall level of debris that makes basically the satellite market unfeasible. So I'm wondering whether you have considered making the debris explicitly convex or threshold based, and how this would change the cap permit price implication. The second question is how do you operationalize the debris compliance? So is it like an ex ante mitigation policy where you are reducing the inflow of debris, or an ex post active debris removal, and how this would affect cost? Because I mean, removing ex post is more costly. There is, I think, a recent Brookings report which says that it's costing in about $1 million per kilogram to remove debris from space. So how you operationalize is important, these type of policies. Third, very quick question, the fringe firms, you are assuming, a sort of competitive market, but we know that there are very large strategic operators of satellite mega constellation. And so I'm wondering how the core results of your paper would change if we are assuming, in terms especially of free riding and market power, how the results would change if we actually move from the competitive market in the fringe sector of your model to an oligopolistic setup. Thanks.
Right, thank you, and a big shout out to Louisa, because she sent us these comments, very good comments and suggestions before the seminar, and we really appreciate that. We'll take a quick stab at each one, and for the first one, yeah, the idea is that we have a stock that we're worried about, and we're also worried about a flow. And certainly in your written comments to us, you pointed out that it may be that the stock of existing debris is a bigger problem than even the flow that we have to control. So the cap and what we would say is the cap and trade approach is designed to control the flow. I think our intuition is that if we can take a first step to get our arms around this big problem, it would be to, I would say, quote, stop the bleeding. So if we could reduce the current flow to something anywhere close to efficient per time period, I think then all the parties involved would have some confidence and some experience, and then that could lead to putting some dent in the stock that we've inherited. So it's a similar problem to our debt versus deficit challenge, right? So first, if we can balance the budget this year, and then we can turn our attention to solving bringing down the debt from previous periods. We appreciate the comment about the ex ante versus the ex post cost. What we envision in the marginal abatement cost function is that as the firm thinks about reducing each additional unit of debris, then that abatement cost function is the result of the firm weighing whether it's cheaper to try to prevent the next unit of debris separating from the satellite as opposed to capturing that debris nearby after it's created.
It's more
So that,
costly, yes.
as you know, that's a common, sort of tension in pollution control problems is how much to spend preventing the problem versus how much to clean it up. And then for the third one, actually what Foley and colleagues do in the cement paper is just what you suggest. So first half of their paper starts with the dominant firm and fringe model to, kind of get intuition and get things rolling. And then the second half of their paper does exactly what you're suggesting, which is that it's more realistic to think of a Cournot oligopoly of fewer larger firms rather than a dominant firm with a competitive fringe. So we haven't taken that step yet. As you know, it's a good bit more complicated, and we get fewer, kind of sure results that way. But that's how far we've come so far.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Matt, would you like to ask your question about self-enforcement?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Thanks, guys. It was a really interesting paper, and I mean, you can see the comment I wrote here. Everybody can read it. I guess I'm trying to imagine the trading systems that you talked about. They have some benefits, but they also have some inflexibilities, right? Whenever you centralize activity like this, you might worry about its ability to be dynamic, especially with the Kessler risk that Louisa was talking about and sort of classic like Weitzman price versus quantity stuff. And so I wonder, it may be too optimistic to imagine that the few dominant players would kind of figure this out on their own and establish some norms for abatement or mitigation. But I wonder, given that you've thought about this a lot, how you think about the horse race between a regulatory and a more privatized co-CN kind of solution.
So there are already some kind of standard regulations that are put in place for debris mitigation. The most popular of these being the NASA framework on trying to reduce the risk of collisions by the quantity of debris. There's a certain percentage that they put out saying that if there is a certain chance that this satellite becomes debris of a certain size or with a certain quantity, whether or not it has a particular ability to cause a certain amount of damage, it's not able to be sent up under the best practices of NASA.
Well, we also thought of ways of incentivizing at least the 4 or 5 biggest players, right? So in the paper, we describe how if we could just get China, Russia, the US, the European Union, and India to get together, what could be done to incentivize those folks? And so we thought of offering founding member kind of privileges.
Mm-hmm.
Analogous to how we organized the start of the SO2 permit market, right? Where the utilities were given a free allocation of permits for X number of time periods. And so we thought of doing something like that could be done too. And as you know, there's a stream of literature on these different ways of allocating the permits at the start as well as over time. And we feel like there's an analogous way of getting the largest contributors on board with this self-enforced or incentivized approach. And the backstop is, from the American point of view, you wouldn't be able to sell satellite services into the US without complying. So, Matt, you might remember at my presentation back in April in Huntsville, I drew for inspiration the national pork producers sued the state of California a few years ago because the state of California was requiring pork farmers in other states to comply with their animal welfare laws. And firms in other states sued California and said, you can't tell us what to do. And the Supreme Court ruled that the state of California can tell firms out of state what to do if you want to sell the output into your state of California. So we're hoping that kind of leverage would create this sort of self-enforcement that if you want to sell into a profitable market, you have to demonstrate that you've complied. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to double dip. I'll just add one quick thought, which is I've always been hoping that you don't need to even go through the regulatory apparatus. That basically SpaceX and Amazon Leo can say the same thing, right? Which is like, if you want to work with us, you got to be responsible about debris. And so I wondered whether that's plausible or not. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
I think so. And because a lot of the groundwork's already been laid, right? That the FCC already requires essentially what we're calling for, but in a little bit different way. So for instance, as you probably know, the FCC, what it governs is that firms have to show that the probability of creating debris is below some threshold. And what we propose in the paper is that, well, that should move from regulating a probability to regulating actual pieces of debris.
Mm-hmm.
And what the cap and trade does is it moves folks from trying to measure how much debris do we have to a system where we're measuring how much debris, well, how much of the satellite does the firm have to present to us at the end of its useful life? And that's a lot easier to measure, right? That this satellite's 95% intact. And therefore 5% of a 1 cubic meter satellite is missing. So that's a lot easier to measure. And we would urge the FCC to adopt a framework, a regulatory threshold like that, than to try to keep track of debris that's scattered all over the orbit.
Thank you. Evelina, would you like to ask your question about regulating this under ESG?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. It's a great presentation and a great article. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff. So my question is whether you consider actually the more traditional and conservative approach of regulating the space debris and putting this under the sustainable goals of the UN, and actually having it under the corporate sustainability directives, which are global, especially for the EU and for the US. This is a big thing now. And basically having companies getting, really responsible before they actually launch the satellite, so that they can take care of the debris after all, and not just so that we embed all the consequences of this as waste management on Earth, actually.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think thank you very much for that suggestion. I think what the cap and trade does is that it pivots from regulating firms in a direct way and setting concrete goals for each firm to setting a goal for the industry and then rewarding firms that do really well. And so there's financial incentive. Mitchell described in his part how, firms that are really efficient with controlling their debris are then able to sell these permits that they're holding to firms that are less efficient. So we care less which firms are generating the debris and which firms are controlling debris, to caring about the overall amount of debris. And then the firms that can't keep up end up having to pay more. So then the firms that are wanting to be known as environmentally conscious and green firms, they will build that reputation simultaneous with generating a lot of revenue for themselves. That those need not be in conflict.
Thank you. And just a last one. Are you considering kind of regulating, or at least modeling space debris on Moon, because it's the next destination for all space missions?
Oh yeah, for the Moon. You want to take that? I think our approach would work equally well with the Moon. We could include the Moon. We started off thinking strictly about low Earth orbit, but our vision, I don't know if it will come to pass before I pass, but but I think in the long run you're going to see a cap and trade type framework all over the solar system.
Brilliant.
And the logic for that, or the inspiration for that, is we see cap and trade of all sorts popping up all over the planet. It's pretty effective.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Eli, I see that you have a raised hand. Do you have a
Yeah,
question? Or
yeah, thanks a lot. So first of all, really appreciate the presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I think it's a really important contribution. If I were a viewer, I would definitely recommend you publish. So my question is going to be quite
Eli, if you could adjust a little bit your mic, I'm having difficulties hearing you.
Is this any better? Oh, right.
I told you it's Mercury in retrograde or something. So would you like to maybe type your question or speak like slower so we can understand? Thanks.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Eli? Or not? Okay. So maybe you want to type in and I can read your question, Eli. And if anyone else would like to jump in to have other suggestions or questions until Eli is figuring out how to type the question into the chat, we are open to other comments. Okay, Rochelle, I'm so sorry. Rochelle, would you like to speak up? Maybe you don't have mic problems.
Does this work now? Just to check, I can then speak afterwards.
Okay, Eli first and then Rochelle.
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot.
Please,
So
go
apologies
ahead.
about that. So I hugely enjoyed the presentation and reading the paper. And so I think it's a really important contribution to evaluate whether this approach can be taken with space debris. If I were reviewing the paper, I would definitely recommend it go forward. I say all that because my question is really doubting a lot of the conclusions. So that was my preface. So my interpretation of the literature that exists at the moment about what I would call price versus quantity targeting for carbon taxes is similar to your opening gambit. We probably cannot completely regulate emissions, or we don't want to because there's a high social cost and maybe there's opposition. And so we need to find some way of doing of lowering emissions while maximizing social value and also potentially having a price discovery mechanism. And so the literature around price versus quantity, so a carbon tax versus a cap and trade system, trades off these benefits. With a cap and trade system, obviously you get price discovery, so you start to know the marginal cost of abatement. You also allow different firms with different efficiencies to trade, which maybe creates a more socially optimal outcome. Whereas the benefit for a price target is a firm might know the level of costs so they can plan for the longer term. Some technology that is looking to abate knows the cost of abatement they need to get to be commercially viable. My confusion is basically that I don't think any of those factors would make me want to have a quantity-based permit system in debris. So if I think about your open and gambit, you're saying, well, there's a lot of opposition to regulating debris, and so we need to find another mechanism. It seems unlikely to me that the price mechanism would have less opposition than the regulation mechanism. And so if we think this is important, it seems like actually really this is much more suited to simple regulation rather than a market mechanism. And the reason for that is the benefits of having space debris are basically nil, whereas the benefits of emitting carbon dioxide are huge. Oil is very, very good and it produces energy for the economy. And at the same time, the cost of abatement is either marginal or much better known for a satellite rather than being unknown and very varied between industries. The cost of abatement for cement versus power versus steel is very, very different. And so we use the quantity mechanism to discover what the price should be. I basically just think none of these factors actually apply in space debris. The costs are low, the benefits are high, and any opposition that is likely to come to a tax is probably going to be the same as opposition that comes to regulation, while also providing, if you use the quantity mechanism you propose, significantly less certainty to companies, let's say, inventing a technology that could help with abatement.
Mm-hmm.
Canonically, the reason economists prefer a price mechanism is if I know carbon capture is $160 a ton, I know as a new firm, if I can get to that cost, I will create value. So while I really appreciate the theoretical framework added here, I basically just don't agree this is the thing we should do.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell. Take a stab at that. Yeah.
So one of the major reasons that myself, Professor Wagner, pursued cap and trade is because of the benefit that highly innovative firms are able to attain. If a firm is able to get a better marginal cost of abatement than another firm, rather than in a taxation approach where they would simply lose less, they would get taxed on less debris. In this framework, firms would actually benefit. Firms would have an incentive to join this sort of market rather than being holistically, no matter what, even if they emit a very, very small amount of debris, they would be at best neutral to join this market. In addition to that, I agree that debris in space is basically there is no real benefit to it, but it is somewhat of I guess, a consequence of doing any business in space. Though, if a firm was able to make their emissions completely nothing at a very low cost, then any implementation, regardless of if it's cap and trade or it's a price-based mechanism, they would still just go to that zero line if it was extremely low cost and if they were able to do that. But it seems as if there is a small possibility, regardless of how much abatement effort goes into trying to minimize this risk, somehow debris will result. And the price discovery mechanism of a cap and trade framework is able to very accurately quantify that marginal abatement cost and in turn kind of get the company's ideas on what is the likelihood of this debris occurring. I find that would be I feel at least intuitively that would be very difficult to just set a price on that because it's very firm dependent on the probability of their particular satellite emitting debris.
Yeah, and quickly, I would just add that we're well along in regulating quantities. Right, the examples that I gave at the US FCC, they are not imposing prices or taxes, and instead they're regulating physical quantities. And so our intuition was that, well, from that historical baseline of what the regulators are used to doing, we're simply marketizing the quantity instrument that they've already pursued for a long time.
If I can very briefly respond, so I think that second answer does make a lot of sense in that if we think there's value to a price discovery mechanism, that is why you would have a price approach rather than a quantity approach. I only briefly read the paper, but I think my read of the paper with you basically said Pigouvian taxes are impossible, so let's try another mechanism. But I think it would benefit from adding actually basically the answer you just gave, which is
right.
There may be some economic rationale for that ties into the literature for a price mechanism. I'll just maybe I misunderstood the first point. What I got as the point in answer to my first question was if you have regulation, firms will just have to incur some costs to match it. Whereas if you have a voluntary permit system, there will be some benefit because of ESG appeal to taking part. That would also apply to a price-based mechanism, equally to a quantity-based mechanism. So I don't think that really works as an answer for why you should have a quantity-based mechanism.
Agreed. Thank you. That's really good. I'm writing it down. We have to deal with that. Yeah.
Thank you, Eli. Rachel, would you like to ask your question now? Rachel Gianfranchi?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I need to apologize that I cannot activate my camera, but I'm glad that you hear my voice. So the question I have is not immediately pertinent to the research that you have been presenting. Thank you very much. My question is a bit provocative. In the current, and this is it, do you think that in the current political environment, having international non-US countries and regulators be submitted to a pricing mechanism that is decided by the FCC is something realistic? And following the question is this reflection uh, for you and other participants to this training course to think about. Would an ITU in the auctioning of spectrum licenses for satellite operators be better placed in placing a price or a mechanism that facilitates debris production limitation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Exactly. We appreciate that provocative question, right? So I would say that the space frontier is one of the few places left these days where folks are still actively cooperating. Just this week, right? The astronauts from around the world were returned together, still working together at the space uh, center and space station. And so I think that there could be some momentum to be built off of that long time collaboration. We only thought of the US FCC taking the lead in, yeah, is as a way to get the ball rolling. It's a big enough market that an international enough market for satellite services that we felt like if something like this could be started in that manner, then it could gain momentum and be picked up in other places. Maybe some countries or some firms would prefer to wait and see how this goes and then join. But certainly, there was a lot of skepticism at the start of the SO2 permit market in the US, and economists too were wondering just how this would go. And would the fairly wealthy and politically influential firms be able to, go along with it, or will they fight it? But world history is full of examples that if you offer this windfall of profit people that ordinarily don't speak to each other all of a sudden, are very happy to take each other's calls. And it's not hard to imagine that there's a big enough financial windfall for all of these parties involved. And that is a, debris is a problem in several avenues, right? For research, for commerce, for military, for a lot of people are worried about the same problem. So I think there's enough synergy, mutual concern, that there's an opportunity to at least try something, which we think is still, I think it's a modest step from what the FCC is doing now, right? To go just one step from command and control to simply regulating in a slightly different way. I
Thank
think
you.
it'd be worth piloting.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. And thank you all for really interesting questions. I would like to thank also Mitchell for the presentation and for writing such an interesting paper, especially as an undergrad. I would like to remind you that the seminar will continue on February 17. We have Alessio Terzi from University of Cambridge talking about from Sputnik to Starship, estimating the learning curve of space launch technology. And the rest of the seminar dates, just as a reminder, are March 26th, April 21st, May 29th. And I will get back to you with the full schedule as soon as we are finishing it. We received a large number of abstracts, and thank you very much for that. One more time, thank you for attending the first seminar. And in the last minute, I saw that Mattia also joined us. Would you like to say something from the ESPI side, Mattia? If you have something to share at the end of the seminar, now is the moment.
No, thank you very much, Joanna. Thanks for introducing everyone to today's lecture, and apologies for my slight delay at the beginning. Well, looking forward to Alessio's seminar, so in the second lecture of this semester, and look forward to see everyone there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, have a lovely evening or afternoon, and I really hope to see you at the next seminar. And thank you again, Jeff and Mitchell, for opening this this seminar series for 2026. Bye.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And thank you, Emma, for all this.
Yes. Thank you, Emma.
You're so
Saving.
welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.